How's it going, everybody? I was going to give a real quick video. Tomorrow I'm going to have a sermon out called COVID. But as I'm doing these Bible studies through Genesis, Exodus, and so on, I thought it was important that I add what these first five books are: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They are called the Pentateuch. They're the first five books of the Old Testament. The word Pentateuch comes from two Greek words. First, penta, which means five, and tuntiach, which means box, jar, or scroll. Originally, the word was used as an adjective meaning a five-scrolled book. I felt that we needed to talk about this since, that we're making Bible studies about it because the word Puntiac is a pretty big word to pronounce. And, the first five books, there's a lot of questions about the first five books. The common Jewish arrangements called the first five books the Torah, or the law or teaching books, is a great way to put them. The early church fathers around AD 200 called them the Puntiac. That's when about, AD 200 is when they started bringing up this word. By that point, Roman Greek was a real big thing, going around back then. They pretty much owned the world. The Hebrews named the first five scrolls coming mainly from the opening words of each scroll. Genesis is in the beginning. Exodus, these are the names. Leviticus, and he called. Numbers, in the wilderness. And Deuteronomy these are the words. Genesis means generation or origin, of course. Exodus means the going out. Leviticus refers to the Levitical system. Numbers refers to the numbering of the tribes, the Levites, and the firstborns through chapters 1 through 4, verse 26. And Deuteronomy means the second law when it gets to that in chapter 17, verse 18. At the end of Genesis chapter 50, the stories of the patriarchs end, which I made a video about the patriarchs, and the story of the people of Israel begins in Exodus chapter 1. The division between Exodus and Leviticus marks the change from the building of the tabernacle in Exodus chapter 35 through 40 and the integration of worship through Leviticus chapter 1 through 10. Numbers begins with the preparation for leaving Sinai, and Deuteronomy stands out sharply from the end of Numbers, and in that Deuteronomy 1:1 begins the great speech of Moses, which covers 30 chapters. It goes from Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 30. He could be that person that never stops talking. He literally is almost the whole chapter is just a great speech he gives. We don't know when the Pentateuch was divided into five books, though. There's a lot of skeptical scholars and all that. You can do your own research, and you're going to find there's literally not any pinpoint thing that they could say when they were arranged into five books. We know when they called them the Pentateuch, which was AD 200, so somewhere around that point in time there had to be a little bit of thing that caused this to happen. But further on to the Pentateuch, the division of the Pentateuch based on the contents may be outlined as Genesis chapters 1 through 11 as the primal history from the creation to Abraham. Genesis 12 through 36 is the the patriarch's history, and Genesis 37 through 50 would be Joseph's story. Then you get to Exodus 1 through 18, that is the Exodus, the going out. Exodus 19 all the way through Numbers 10, verse 10, can be Israel at Sinai. This whole time they're camped around that area. And then Numbers 10, verse 11, all the way to chapter 21, verse 35, Israel is in the wilderness. Then you can jump from Numbers 22, verse 1 to Deuteronomy chapter 34 as Israel is in the plains of Moab. Now, some interesting themes about the Pentateuch. The first theme in the Pentateuch is God is the creator in Genesis 1 through 2. This is followed closely by the chapter of the beginning of sin in Genesis 3, and so on and so on. The Genesis chapter 4 through 11, the generations, they're increasing, the sin's increasing, the judgment from God on the whole world. And Then the themes of the election, the covenant, the promise, the faith, and the providence are introduced in the remainder of Genesis 12 through 50. Then the divine deliverance is a major theme of Exodus 1 through 18, and the covenant and the laws are themes through Exodus 19 through 24, and the worship and social ethnics are the concerns of Exodus chapter 25 through Numbers 10:10. Guidance of the rebellious people through the great and terrible wilderness marks from Numbers 10 through 21. If you can hear that, my son loves playing in the bath pretty loud. And preparations for going over Jordan and conquering Canaan are the major topics of Numbers 22 through Deuteronomy chapter 34. There's many literal forms and genres of the Pentateuch. The Pentateuch includes many literal forms and genres: narratives, laws, lists, sayings, sermons, and songs. Narratives describe the creation, the judgment, the flood, aka the travel, the wilderness wanderings, the buildings of the ark, the tabernacles, the marriage. Isaiah and Isaac and Rebecca would be a perfectly good thing about the marriages there, and the births. Moses can be one of the births that we could be talking about through this, especially since they really say that he writes most of this, if not all of it. Although the Pentateuch is often referred to as the Torah of the law comprises only of a small percent age of the text. The Ten Commandments through Exodus 20, verses 2 through 17, and Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 6 through 21 are frequently called the law, but they are not the law in the technical sense because no penalties or sanctions are connected to them. So other groups of the law in the Pentateuch are the Book of the Covenants. Exodus chapter 20, verse 22 through chapter 23, verse 19, and the laws of sacrifice, Leviticus chapter 1 through 7, the laws of purity, Leviticus 11 through 15, the holiness code, Leviticus 17 through 26, and the Deuteronomy code, Deuteronomy 12 through 26. No laws appear in Genesis, though. The holiness code that I was talking about in Leviticus chapter 17 through 26 is named from the expression, "Ye shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." Leviticus chapter 19, verse 2, and Leviticus chapter 20, verse 7, and verse 26. The Holiness Code says very little about the agriculture. Much more is said in this code that in the Book of Covenant about forbidding sexual relations, including homosexuality. You can compare that to Leviticus chapter 18, verses 1 through 23, and chapter 20, verse 13. All forms of witchcraft and the opulent that comes around all that are forbidden in Leviticus 17:7. There's a lot of evil stuff when it comes to occults and witchcraft type of stuff. But then the Deuteronomic Code, chapter 12 through 26 in Deuteronomy, is part of Moses' address to the 12 tribes just before they crossed the Jordan to go into Canaan. These are preached laws, full of take heed to this and obey this so that the Lord may bless them and they may live in the land. Deuteronomy 12, chapter 12, verse 1, verse 13, 19, and 28, and many of them. But anyways, through this, many of these 80 laws that are talked about are new because he is addressing them to a new generation by this point. Compared to when he first gave some laws, all them people had pretty much died off by then. So many attempts have been made to classify the laws of the Old Testament according to their types. Some scholars, get this, have put some terms on them. Scholars have used it as apodic and causistic. There we go, causistic, to refer to two main types of law. The apodic refers to the authoritative, the unconditional laws such as the Ten Commandments, which begin "thou shalt not," "you shall," or laws calling for death penalty. The causistic law are usually case laws which begin when a man, or if a man, or this classification is helpful in identifying the literary forms, setting, and perhaps the origin of the law. Christians often speak of the Old Testament, though, as laws as moral, civil, and ceremonial, but the Old Testament does not use these categories to classify these laws, even though we do. There's nowhere really in the Old Testament that they state any of that like we do. But the Old Testament laws were given in the context of a covenant. The Pentateuch contains many lists. They go from genealogical, Genesis 5, Genesis 11, and Exodus 5, geographical, Genesis 10, tribal, Genesis 49 and Deuteronomy 33, offerings, Exodus 35, the census, Numbers 1 through 4, and the campsites in the wilderness, Numbers 33. The Old Testament contains many sayings of various kinds. Some are poetic, some are proverbial, some are just out there. I mean, some of the sayings they say are way out there, but these sayings have been remembered and passed from generation to generation. Some familiar examples in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, of sayings that were passed along was, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Genesis chapter 2, verse 23. And also, "For dust you are, and to dust you will return." Genesis chapter 3, verse 19. And then also, "No one like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord." Genesis chapter 10, verse 9. And then here's another one. "I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious." Exodus chapter 33, verse 19. These can all be sayings like this that were passed down through generation to generation. An interesting thing getting towards the end of this video, that the date and authorships, there's a problem with that. There is a problem with that. They can't necessarily pinpoint the date and the authorship of the Pentateuch is one of the major critical problems of the Old Testament. I'm taking a saying here from 1924 from a Dr. John R. Sampe. He wrote, "Possibly the higher criticisms of the Pentateuch is the most important critical problem confronting students of the Old Testament. Fundamentally and difficult, it calls for patience, industry, and the ability to sift evidence and examine its value. It requires logical discipline and well-balanced mind." That was from John R. Sampe, a doctor from 1924. That was his quote on why it's so hard with major critical problems with putting a date and all this, because everybody wants a date when it comes to something to back it up, which I can understand. But further on, we don't know who wrote the complete Pentateuch, honestly. The Pentateuch makes no claims that Moses wrote all of it. Just because these books were wrote by Moses, it doesn't say anywhere through this that Moses wrote every piece of the 5 books. He had a part in all 5, but we have not 100% evidence, proof of anything. Many theories and hypotheses have been advanced to explain its origin. My son is really mad at me. The Pentateuch was formed of 4 basic literal documents identified as J, E, D, and P. The J stood for Jehovah or Judah, and was supposedly written in the southern kingdom about 850 BC, and the E stood for Elohim, a favorite Hebrew name for God. It was supposedly written about 750 BC, and the D stands for Deuteronomy and was written, according to the hypothesis, about 621 BC, and the P stands for the priestly document and was written about 500 BC, and the priestly writer might have compiled the whole Pentateuch according to this theory. In conclusion, to wrap this up, no agreement has been reached as to the final solution to most difficult problems. Here are some things that are clear. 1. We should take the claims of the Bible concerning itself seriously, but keep our minds and hearts open to new and different possible interpretations, not meaning anything is false. For instance, somebody's really well off with the Lord. He gives you an educated guess of things that he has broken down of what he thinks the first 5 books are like. The Bible does tell us, do not deny people that have a biblical background if they're giving you true biblical things. And not an exact form of that, but in the New Testament talks about that. That just be leery that there is people that are giving you false things, but then there is people out there that are giving you an educated guess from them of what they're reading and studying, but they're leaving biblical evidence in it so it's not false to you. Everybody has a right to an opinion. But then, two, there are certain questions of date, authorship, historical reliability, and so forth that we must be settled by that it must be settled by the historical and literal criticism. There is no other way to settle them. There is no other way. And three, it is not necessary that we know the date and authorship of the book in the Bible before we can read it with a prophet. At times, we must sacrifice our need for security and certainty to God's nature as the sovereign mystery. We don't need to know when things were actually said and done. We don't need to know what God looks like. We don't need to know when it was all writ. We just need to study it all and enjoy it. So everybody, this is the video about Pentateuch, the first 5 books that I wanted to give you guys, and I hope that you enjoy it, and may God bless you.